Perfectionism is something that, and really like black and white thinking is something that those of us with ADHD can really struggle with. And if we start to think like, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to do. Like say you create a plan for yourself. You're like, okay, this week I'm going to do all these things. You make a beautiful plan up with your nice stationery and all of this stuff. And then you don't execute it exactly like you said you were going to. Then you get mad at yourself and you're like, what's the point of any of this? I can't do anything.
Hey everyone, I'm Megs, and you're listening to the Mindful Megs podcast, Organizing an ADHD Brain, where you will hear stories from me and others on how we organize both our brains and our lives while living with ADHD. We talk about how ADHD can be your superpower if you know how to harness it. I found out I had ADHD 2 years ago, and it was very difficult for me to find acceptance. Now that I know so much, I want to share what I know and help others understand that this diagnosis is not your downfall. It's a eureka moment where you can now understand how your brain operates and how to figure out how to thrive. You can expect to feel inspired, like you're not alone, and learn about so many of the incredible organizational tools there are to help your head stay on straight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome back to Organizing an ADHD Brain. I am here with the incredible Jenn Watts. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Megs. Thanks so much for having me.
Heck yeah. So I was just reminiscing with Jenn about the fact that I found her on Instagram and commented on one of her posts, and now we're here and I'm interviewing her on my podcast. So Jenn, tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and the work that you do. Share with us, who is Jenn Watts?
Yeah, okay, sure. Hi. Well, I'm Jenn. So I focus on women with ADHD, well, really anybody with ADHD who is pursuing weight loss. And it took me a long time to be comfortable saying that, but I am somebody who was late diagnosed with ADHD, and I also have struggled with my weight basically since I was in my early teens. And to me, that was like a huge revelation, the connection between the two. And so that's what I do now. I'm actually a CPA, but I became very passionate about, sharing this with other people and helping other people to make that connection so that they can actually, reach their weight loss goals or actually make progress. And so that's what I do now. I'm a life coach, I'm a nutrition coach, and I just help people on that journey.
That is so cool. And I know I shared with you, I wish I knew all about this 8 years ago. And you were like, me too.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely. Yeah.
it's so telling, right? I feel like the more we talk about ADHD, the more we learn about our brains and how it's connected to food and emotions and the way we function in a not so neurotypical way.
Mhm.
So when did you find out you had ADHD and what was that diagnosis like?
Yeah, I think my story is probably similar to a lot of, women in my position. So my child, one of my kids was diagnosed. So he was about, I think he was 7. So he's now 11 or 12. No, he's 11. So it was 4 years ago he was diagnosed and I knew nothing about it. Like I knew nothing about ADHD. He was kind of expressing a lot of the same things that I had struggled with as a kid. He was really anxious, really hard on himself. It's just interesting because now when I think about what a typical, little kid with ADHD is, it's not even the way my son was. But so he was diagnosed and I like did the deep dive, obviously, like reading everything I could, wanted to help him as best possible. And it never occurred to me that it was anything that affected me. I just figured, oh, it must have come from my husband's side of the family because through the whole process learned there was quite a few people in his family who had it as well. But the more I read, and then it was honestly like people on social media, like Instagram and stuff like that. And I'd see all these posts about ADHD, especially in women. And I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Everybody's like that. Like, come on. But then I slowly started to realize, oh, actually, not everybody's like that. The reason it seems like everybody's like that to me is because I'm like that. And I don't know why nobody really asked if I had it because I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression when I was 13. and, experience so much of that stuff, which again is a very common thing. Like we get misdiagnosed and just treated as such. And I was a very functional mother and accountant. So nobody from the outside would have thought I was struggling, but it was very internal for me. So, anyhow, through all of that, I actually had to pursue the diagnosis myself. So, I managed to see a psychiatrist who was like, yes, absolutely, you have it. And yeah, and then it was just, yeah, everything just opened up for me, it feels like, from there.
Wow. I remember having so many eureka moments
Wow.
after I had learned that I had ADHD. For me, it took a little while to accept it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
After getting diagnosed, do you feel like it made your life a little bit easier?
It's so interesting. I waffled for a long time, kind of like you, like second guessing it. And then it's almost like we kind of gaslight ourselves. Like, really, I don't really have this. Maybe I really am just kind of
Yeah.
lazy. Like maybe I am just kind of like, I just don't try hard enough, Or maybe I'm just super disorganized and, I'm just blaming it on ADHD, but I just have to try harder. I can't believe how much of that still happens. I'm a lot better now, but in the beginning, that really happened for a long time, was just like, oh, this is probably not real. And I didn't want to tell anybody because I felt like it was an excuse because you hear that narrative so much, right? Like of like, oh, come on, everybody does that, which is like what I just said earlier. But but I felt a little bit ashamed to tell anybody because I felt like people would think I was just trying to make excuses. But I did find so much comfort in realizing that all of these things that I thought were personality flaws or things that were wrong with me, it seemed like everybody else got it in life. And I was just on the outside looking in, being like, I don't understand any of this and I can't make it work. With the diagnosis, I was like, oh my gosh, there isn't anything wrong with me. My brain just works differently. And so, yes, so there's so much up and down of like not trusting it and then also finding tremendous relief in it. So, yeah, it's a real whirlwind.
Yeah, it really is. And I love how you were talking about the shame that comes along with it because something that I have come to terms with is instead of putting myself down because of how my brain works, when I do something that I don't appreciate, I say, shoot, I didn't like that I did it that way, but I'm not going to put myself down for it. I'm going to accept that I don't want to do that again. And so I'm going to put something in place to ensure that I don't continue to make that same mistake, right? Like if forgetting a
Mhm.
birthday. And I'm going to make sure that that's on my calendar. And I'm going to make sure that maybe I have a reminder set up 24 hours ahead of time so that I can remember. I think the hardest part too is that, as people pleasers, we
Mhm.
don't want to let anyone else down. And
Yeah.
sometimes with our short term memory, we can because things don't often pop up for us or have a plan in place if we're so focused on something else in our life. And
Oh, yeah.
so
Yeah.
giving ourselves the grace to know that it's not a character flaw. It's not I am a forgetful person and that's like who I am for the rest of my life. It's more of I don't have really great short-term memory because of the way my brain works. So I'm going to put tools in place that help me understand how I can be better.
Oh,
And
and I love what you said. You use the word acceptance, like accepting, because that is a big part of what I work with people on is awareness and acceptance. And that's been a huge, huge tool for me because I still find myself, or for a long time, really found myself still, even though I knew, okay, my brain works differently, I can't do things exactly like everybody else. I still would sort of subconsciously kind of have that expectation of myself. Like I'm still gonna like I can still do everything just like everybody else and then be mad at myself at the end of the day when it didn't happen, right? And I find that really being aware of and accepting like, okay, this is not how my brain works. I don't do things in this manner and it's okay to do things differently. It's okay to have a different approach. That has been like really one of the only ways I've been able to make actual true change rather than having this expectation that I should just do it like everybody else. And there's nothing wrong with me that I have to do it differently. It's okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and even that there is a different approach. I think that was a huge thing for me. Like I didn't even know you could do it differently.
I know.
It seems so
Yeah.
simple, right? Just think about it differently. And I want to dive into your business a little bit because I want to
Mhm.
learn so much more. I think it's so fascinating the way that you support women through their weight loss journey because
Mhm.
that's been something I've dealt with myself since I was 10, maybe. I remember thinking about my weight and then I looked in the mirror for so long and I would say, how do I figure out how to lose weight today? That is what I would do every single day when I would look at myself. Now, my journey is a little bit different in that I had bariatric surgery, but
Mhm.
I'm proud of that journey. I
Yeah.
asked for help, I got the help, and now I don't look in the mirror every single day and say, how do I become skinny? Because I feel so confident. Now, there's a lot of other work mentally that I had to do to
Mhm.
get myself into the position I am today. A lot of that is positive self talk, things like that. But tell us how you found yourself in this space and yeah, and about what you do. I'm so fascinated.
Yeah. Well, first want to say too, I love that you are like you're not trying to hide the fact that you had bariatric surgery because there's so many tools out there and different tools work for different people and nobody should be shaming or judging anybody for whatever approach that they happen to take. So I love that. So, yeah, so I struggled with this since I was a teen and I'm still on my own weight loss journey, which I think is a big part of why this I feel so passionate about this because I'm really in the trenches and I really understand this. But what I do is really help to make that connection between our traits and our symptoms and the way that we operate as people with ADHD and how that kind of factors into how you might have struggled with your weight in the first place and how that affects your attempts at trying to make change because there is so much noise out there. There are so many like do this, do that, don't do this when it comes to weight loss. And all of us, I think many of us with ADHD have really tried everything, right? And I mean, physiologically, it's all the same. It's, eat less, move more, which I have almost like a visceral reaction to that
Oh my
statement,
gosh,
but
totally. Yeah.
yes,
Calories,
but
counting. Ah.
oh gosh, yes, all of that. So yes, physiologically we're the same. Like that's kind of what you have to do to technically lose weight, but what goes into it, especially as somebody with ADHD, is so vast and there's so many other things we need to consider. And that's where I come in is that I just want to say like, hey, there's nothing wrong with you that you feel like you can't stick to things or you feel like something's missing or it's like white knuckling for you to try to just stick to these rigid plans because there's other components that you need to consider, and a big part of that is like our emotions. I know you talked to Jenna Free recently, and the way that she talks about it, I always picture the graph that she has that shows this like, this dysregulated state that we get in and how we want to kind of stay regulated in the middle. Obviously, that he has a huge impact when you're trying to reach a weight loss goal. And so that's what I do is just work with people to help them to recognize the ways that it's impacting them and what are some of the different approaches that they can take to still be able to reach their goals, but not necessarily in the way that everybody else is doing it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I appreciate that so much because that's the way that I approach organizing. I ask people so much about how they live their lives because a lot of ADHD comes with routines and things that trigger other things that we do. We don't necessarily have habits that we do without thinking of them because we are so in our brain all the time. So executive functioning skills are very hard for us. So even with organizing, my way of doing it with ADHD is going to be different than yours, which is going to be
Yes.
different than my neighbors, and
Mhm.
so on and so on and so on. I know for me, even with building my business or moving up through the corporate world, I always was seeking to find the perfect answer. Tell me how you did it. I'm going to do that too because I want what you have. It's like we can find out what other people did, but we still have to figure out what works for us
Yeah.
because we can't change everything about her. I can't be Jen Watts. You
Mm-mm.
can't be
Mm-mm.
Megs Crawford. And
Yeah.
there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's why there's coaches. That's why there's people out there working with individuals to help them see that there's a path for them that doesn't necessarily have a step-by-step method out there.
Oh my gosh. what you just said is exactly it. It's we need to have autonomy in the process, right? Like everybody is different, and your life is not going to fit into the same box as everybody else's. And you actually being able to reach your goals is going to require you to have a plan that adapts to what your actual life is like. And oh my gosh, I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, yes.
Classic.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those amazing like ADHD paradoxes where we're like, don't tell me what to do, but also I really need some help and some guardrails and structure, right? So I think that's where people with coaches can be really, really helpful is that we're not here to tell you these are the 10 steps that you take and you do it in this exact way. That is never going to work for people. But what a coach can do is help you to say, like, okay, let's take a look at your life as it is. And what are your goals? And how can we build guardrails, structure, whatever you want to call it, strategies that are actually doable for you, make sense to you, and you have input into it because we have to have input. Like the autonomy part of it is so important. It's so important.
I love that. And so you're on your own journey.
Yep.
What kind of tools or strategies have you implemented into your own life to see the transformation? Can you tell us a story?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I learned in all of my like research and learning and everything about ADHD is that has been very revelatory for me with my journey has been how our brains work differently when it comes to our body cues. Because when I first was like, okay, ADHD and weight loss, like how does this all work? Everything kept coming back to intuitive eating. And I was like, I feel like this doesn't work for me. And then also intuitive eating, like they say weight loss shouldn't be your goal. So, anyways, there was a lot of confusion for me at first. And I realized through other research that our bodies work differently when it comes to our interoceptive awareness. So it made sense to me that I don't feel hunger and satiety as quickly or the same as other people. And so finding different ways for me to tap in and actually pay attention to that really intentionally and start to find ways to actually listen to my body in a way that made sense for me and my brain probably made the biggest difference for me because I knew, and everybody's different. I knew that calorie counting, macro counting, whatever the case may be, it just wasn't the right approach for me. And not to knock anybody who that does work for them, but I knew I needed to find a way to really like trust myself and learn how to listen to my body and understanding and having the acceptance that like it's just different for me was a huge part of it. So now I've kind of implemented these little things of when it's time to eat and I can sit for like even if it's 5 seconds and just be like, okay, what does my body actually feel like? Do I really feel hunger? Is it in my stomach? Like, or is it emotional hunger? And then taking a couple seconds halfway through my meal to check in with myself, how I feel. Like being intentional about these things has made an amazing difference for me in my journey and really allowed me to actually learn how to pay attention and then see the sort of progress towards my goals that I'm looking for.
Oh, I love that so much. And it's interesting too because I have noticed just this last month we had a death in our family. I noticed how my snacking increased. I was seeking dopamine in ways that I don't normally seek it. There was a big thing of M&Ms at my sister's house and I was like, this is amazing. I would constantly go for the M&Ms. And one thing I had started to implement before was, am I actually hungry or am I seeking something that's going to help me get the dopamine I'm seeking? And
Yeah.
so that was a helpful question I started to ask myself. But as I was going through this transition and experiencing all of these emotions I'm not used to and dysregulation, I noticed that I was trying to find regulation in all of these unhealthy ways. And the truth is that that's the way that I would seek it out when I was younger.
Yeah.
And so as I'm getting back into my routine and understanding myself, I think it's pretty fascinating how being in the moment and really recognizing the moment that you're in with the regulation. I just think it's fascinating how you can allow yourself to go through these experiences and not be shameful about it. Because I did notice as well that I would start to think about, okay, well, I'm gaining weight because I'm eating more sugary snacks on a regular basis. And I started to put myself down. And I'm
Mm,
like, wrong. That is not the way we do
yes.
things anymore. And I had to stop that in my brain. And so that's a lot of what I do with organizing too, is like, you're not broken and shame is not going to get you anywhere in the game. You're the only doing that to yourself. So, how do you work with your clients on the shame that can come up when we're just literally living our lives and trying to take care of ourselves in the best way we know how in those moments?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Self-compassion is an incredibly huge part of it. It's absolutely necessary. And it's also very hard. But that is one of the things that I work on that with everybody, including myself. And it's always a work in progress. When you're talking about the M&Ms, this is a pattern that I had in my life, and I see this in a lot of people. We kind of eat in a disordered manner throughout the day, and we have all the stresses of life, motherhood, work, all of the decision fatigue that we get into. And so a lot of us will find ourselves in the pantry or just tending to overeat in the evening for all those reasons you just said, where our brains are seeking dopamine, we're looking for relief, we're looking for whatever kind of emotional help that we need. And for a lot of us, we go to food for that. And rather than just saying oh, well, just that's not within your calories, just stop eating, just stop eating. That doesn't work for us. And
No, it
so,
does not.
yes, having that compassion and understanding for yourself and accepting, hey, I might be looking for something, like I need relief because I'm just feeling overwhelmed, or I feel so stressed out. And rather than being upset with yourself and saying, why can't you just get it together and stop eating? To instead say, hey, you know what? I'm really missing something here. And I need to show myself some kindness. And it makes sense that I found myself in the pantry. So just having that moment, I mean, not every time it's not going to work, right? It's not like every time you're going to be like, oh, that's why I'm here. Okay, I can get out of here now.
Right.
It doesn't work
We
that
need like
way. And that's
signs
okay.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay. But we can start to recognize that that's why it's happening. And then that gives us the opportunity to kind of take a few steps back in the day and say, okay, yeah, you know what? I got really busy and I didn't finish my lunch. So maybe now I'm actually really hungry, but I'm after the things that aren't really going to satisfy me. Or you know what? My boss was being such a jerk today and it made me feel this way, and that's maybe what started this cycle and why I'm feeling this way. So really it's just in that moment, not judging yourself, but becoming curious to say, I wonder why I feel this way. And I wonder why I'm here. And not expecting yourself to just not do it anymore. To start to pattern interrupt and just say, what is the reason why this is happening? And then we can start to have strategies going forward to say, oh, okay, I notice this always happens to me on Wednesdays and Thursday nights. So maybe next week I can take preventative measures to help myself to feel a little bit better before that time of the day. But just completely from a lens of not judging and just accepting that these are the kind of things that happen, and we can find ways to work with it.
We are going to be right back to the podcast after this short break. Thank you so much for your support over these last couple of months. I wanted to remind you to leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast, because it really supports us and helps us continue the work we're doing towards ADHD, organizing, and really helping people understand that their brain is not broken. One of my favorite reviews out there on Apple Podcasts is called Not Just for People with ADHD. I first found out about Megs on another podcast where she was being interviewed. I absolutely loved her insight and positive outlook on things and could closely relate to her entrepreneurial journey. I didn't listen to her podcast right away because I thought I wouldn't be able to relate to the content, as I don't have ADHD myself, nor know anyone close who has been diagnosed, but I was wrong. This podcast is truly for anyone. The content is so relatable to everyday life. She is very positive and shares great perspective. Followed on both of my podcast apps so I can continue to follow her journey. Thanks for putting yourself out there, lady. And that's from Chelsea. Chelsea, thank you so much. please go ahead and leave a review. If you go to Apple Podcasts, scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can tap to rate 5 stars, and then you can write a review with your thoughts. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm always interested in what my listeners have to say. And thank you so much for those of you who have reached out already. Now back to our program with Jenn.
And you say it in a way of it's not you can just make a decision to do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's the same with any change that you're trying to make in your life. When I think about making a big change, I want to be perfect at it right away. And oftentimes that is what holds me back from taking the steps that I need to take to get to that end result. Now that I've done so much work and understand my brain a little bit, I know that the big things that I want in the future are going to take baby steps to get there. So when it comes to weight loss, when it comes to organizing, when it comes to literally anything you want in your life, the first step is maybe just acknowledging that there's a change you want to happen. And it's okay that you don't start to take action on the change right away, but even just acknowledging it and becoming more aware, it's starting to get into that thought pattern of, I notice that I'm doing this. I'm not going to beat myself up over it, but there's a reason why I'm doing this. I want to acknowledge it. And I want to start to understand what's making me do this. And so like that is the beginning. It's a work in progress, and we start to notice these patterns that we have so that we can start to really understand how to live the lives that we really want to live.
Oh, there's so many things I want to say about that. Even just taking baby steps, that can be really hard for us, especially if you're like you have a long ways to go in things like organizing or weight loss. But it is so important to break it down like that, because if we just have that end goal in mind, it can be so overwhelming that we just become paralyzed and do nothing. So breaking it down into small pieces and working towards achieving a small goal and making that into a habit can make such a big difference, because we get that sense of reward. We get that sense of like fulfillment that we actually achieved the little thing that we said we were going to do. And that helps us to keep going. Perfectionism is something that, and really like black and white thinking is something that those of us with ADHD can really struggle with. And if we start to think like, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to do. Like say you create a plan for yourself. You're like, okay, this week I'm going to do all these things. You make a beautiful plan up with your nice stationery and all of this stuff. And then you don't execute it exactly like you said you were going to. Then you get mad at yourself and you're like, what's the point of any of this? I can't do anything. The thing that's going to keep us going is having almost like a second plan of like, what am I going to do when things don't go exactly according to my, and how am I going to be compassionate with myself to say, yeah, I wanted to do it this way. It's not working out. Life happens. Things don't go exactly according to plan, but I can still keep going. You know, just like you, when you're in conversation with Bailey, one thing that I loved so much was how she talked about continuity rather than consistency. And I think about that a lot, like, especially when it comes to staying the path on our journeys, is what do I do in those moments so that I can just kind of keep going and not be mad at myself to the point where I just stop? Because it's so easy for that to happen.
It's so true. And
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that, because we ultimately have to fail. We've got to have plans not go as planned so
Yeah.
that we can understand what's not going to work. That's part of what's so beautiful about taking action, is that you have no idea what's going to happen when you start to take action. And you've got to accept that the results are going to be the results that they are. And then how are you going to modify things from there? And
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I think is so fascinating about making these different changes in your life and creating new neural pathways in your brain so that you can talk to yourself in a positive way. It's fascinating what we're able to do when we continue to try at something. Even
Mm-hmm.
when we feel like we might be failing miserably, it's all of those failures that are getting us to the next steps and to
Yeah.
the place that we ultimately want to be on the other side.
Yeah. Perfectionism and thinking that it's supposed to look a certain way, all that's going to do is hold us back. And taking that messy action, I always refer to it as messy because it's not going to look right. And we're never going to have a guaranteed outcome, right? We have to try things not only to just get ourselves into motion, but also just to see what works for us. Because maybe your first attempt at something is it turns out it wasn't the right fit for you. And that's okay, but at least you know now that you tried it and it didn't work. Now you know, and now you can take a different approach. But, even like you were saying with, your client, like saying like it's not going to be like this or like, perfect. We don't want it to be perfect, because if that's what the goal is, like say on a weight loss journey, if you think I am going to be 100%, I'm going to stick to everything exactly, the way that I planned it out, you can't live the rest of your life like that. And so what's going to happen if you say, yeah, I'm just going to like stick to my diet or whatever perfectly until I lose the weight? What's going to happen when you actually lose the weight? And you
Right.
still have to live the rest of your life, and it's not going to be perfect. So learning how to adapt in the waves of the ups and downs of life is probably the thing that's going to keep you going for the rest of your life. Basically, it's learning how to live in a compassionate way where you're still working towards your goals. You can still be successful, but just don't place those expectations on yourself that everything's going to go perfectly, because it never will. And then you're just going to be disappointed all the time.
Oh my gosh. What also helps me is just the fact that we're all humans trying to make it in this world. I don't care how successful you look on paper, on Facebook, on Instagram. We're all trying to do our damn best.
Yeah.
And we all make mistakes. And we're all trying to get to that point where we're thriving in life. And for me, that just makes me feel a little bit better about making the mistakes and putting myself
Mm-hmm.
out there. And even with this podcast, I was so nervous at first because I thought the podcast would be way more about organizing and like
Mm-hmm.
strategically putting this here and that there. But the truth is the more I learn about my brain and how other people work, the more I'm able to help my clients in a way that really makes sense. And it has nothing to do with a product that is going to solve all of your problems.
Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. And like that, I mean, well, first of all, the whole concept of other people going through things. I don't know if you know anything about Kristen Neff, who's the founding mother of like self-compassion, but that is one of the key parts of self-compassion is common humanity, knowing that you're not the only person
Mm.
going through this. And that has really been for me in my experience as somebody learning about how I operate with ADHD and seeing other people like on social media. I know social media gets a bad rap, but like for me, that's been a huge part of learning. Oh my gosh, I am not the only person who deals with this from both kind of like a funny perspective, but also I spent so many years just suffering, 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 thinking, why can't I be like everybody else? What is wrong with me? And now seeing other people experiencing that kind of stuff is, oh my gosh, it's just been like an instrumental change in my life, because I know I'm not alone and I know I'm not a broken person. And just having that common humanity of other people that are experiencing things, maybe not exactly like me, but similar to me, like you don't feel alone anymore. And you feel like, okay, I can almost breathe a sigh of relief. And if I want to do things differently, maybe I can find a way to do things differently, but the way I am is not wrong. So it's been a
Yes.
big thing for me.
And this has nothing to do with what either of us do, except that we're both moms. And so, with kids with ADHD, how have you found understanding your own brain to make a significant difference in the way that you parent your son?
Wow. Okay, so first of all, I have 3 kids, and they're not all diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure they're all ADHD.
Yeah.
But it has been like I have moments where I'm just overwhelmed with emotion about it, because I think of when I was a kid, and I see him and all my kids experiencing these same things as I did. And it is so sort of rewarding for me to be able to show them that compassion and understanding and say, like, you're not being a bad kid because you can't focus in and just do these things, right? Like, it's okay that they maybe need more gentle reminders than somebody else. It's okay that, they focus in on things that other people don't, or whatever the case may be. But it's almost like rewarding to my younger self to be able to express that and handle it that way with them, especially when it comes to the anxiety piece of it. 2 of my kids really deeply experience the anxiety that kind of comes along with ADHD, but being able to be so much more understanding around that and help them to understand your brain is amazing and it comes up with these stories, which is so cool. But also, we can get really carried away and start to think things might happen that are really unlikely to happen, but it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you that this happens. And let's
Yeah.
talk through it. Sometimes when we get the words out of our heads, then you realize like, oh, that's actually probably kind of a little bit silly or really not likely to happen. And just being able to talk through those kind of things with them is so nice because
Ugh.
I really suffered alone in that when I was a kid and I didn't have words for it. And now we know so much more now and we can experience that stuff with them and help them to like verbalize what's going on. And it's just been so helpful. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Even as far as regulating emotions and just understanding how to take a deep breath and understanding why you're feeling this way versus it being a reactionary thing. But I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole with
Yes.
that one.
Yes.
Rabbit hole.
Yeah, I never know.
Um,
Trail hole. I don't know.
ever. So tell me a little bit, as a CPA, as a mom,
Mm.
as a business owner, how do you find that you organize your life in a successful way that makes sense for you?
Yeah, this is really cool. My Sundays have become just a little piece of my Sundays have become really crucial to the rest of my life basically working. And this took a long time for me to sort of fine tune it and make it something that worked for my life. But I take Sunday morning and I make sure I get my coffee that I really like, my blanket that I really like, and my notebook that I really like. And I just make a plan. And it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's just sort of like loose plan of what's everybody doing this week? Is anybody traveling? What's happening? And then even as far as to think of like, go take a quick look in the fridge and the freezer. What kind of food do we have on hand that we want to use up? And just have a strategy, a really loose strategy. It's not like this is what we're doing every single day for this week, but just to say like, okay, I'm going to make sure I have things on hand to do this. So just having this general malleable idea of what I'm going to do for the week has made such a big difference for me because if I have like everything I need on hand to make the week work, like when it comes to food in particular, I'm getting rid of that decision fatigue and I'm just ready for whatever comes up. It makes me feel so much more equipped. So that has been a game changer for me. But it took some time to find the way that works for me, right? And that's what's really important is I'm not doing this in a way that I saw somebody on Instagram do it and that's how I do it now. It was like trial and error of figuring out what works for me, what works for my family, what I actually like to do and what will I continue to do. So that's a big
Yeah.
part of it. That's how I organize my life.
I love that because while I don't take time on Sundays, I take time. I wake up at 5 a.m. every single morning so that I have time for myself to
Mm,
really think and to start to plan. It doesn't always go perfectly. Sometimes I let myself do other things, but most of the time I'm meditating, I am journaling, and then I'm planning for the day, but not necessarily in a rigid, strict way, but more along the lines, I'll still set reminders for myself because that's so
mhm.
important.
We have to,
But
right?
yeah, but also I did not learn it from someone somewhere else. I literally just knew and started to understand I had to take that time for myself, no matter what. And I think that wherever you find that, I think the biggest takeaway is find time for yourself, whether it's Sunday
Mhm,
morning, whether it's every morning at 5 a.m., or if that despises you so much, maybe it's from 8 to 9 p.m. where
mhm.
you have a cozy blanket, right? You create this space of loving for yourself where you get to focus on the things you know that are going to make your life easier. How cool.
Mhm.
I
I
love
know.
that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love it too.
And that space that you create for yourself, I think, is just so important because our brains can take us on a train ride as soon as we
Mhm,
get up in the morning. We can start to go, go, go because we're so used to that. But
mhm.
taking time to slow down and get into what matters is a game
Yeah.
changer.
And a big part of that too is I find with moms that I work with and myself too, dealing with the guilt that comes along with that. Like, oh,
Mm.
I can't take time for myself. I can't do that. That's so selfish. No, it's not. No, it's not. Like, it's necessary. We need to recharge ourselves, in order to be the mom that we want to be or the person that we want to be throughout the day. It's really important. And it's not selfish. It's important. Yeah.
And to highlight that, we grew up in a world where we saw women giving themselves so much without getting paid for it, but to seriously just see them giving, giving, giving until they broke down to the point that they couldn't give anymore. But when you think about filling yourself up, call it whatever the heck you want. You want to call it selfish, call it whatever you want. When you are able to fill up your own damn cup to the point where you're bursting with the life and the light that's inside of you, you get to show up for people in ways you couldn't even imagine. If you're not able to fill up yourself first and love yourself first, you're not showing up in the same way that you could be, which I think is why, again, when we come back to being selfish, call it selfish. Who cares? Put a positive spin on it, because you get to show up for others in a totally different way when you are selfish in a very positive way.
Exactly. And that's what I want to show to my daughters too, is exactly what you were just saying. I don't want that to be the example of what a mother is somebody who like has no sense of self and is just always striving and working for other people and has no sense of self. Like, I want them to see it's very important to take time for yourself and to recharge and to rest and incorporate all those things into your life. I think it's so important because they see the flip side of that. When I go through periods where I'm not doing that, mom's not very fun to be around, you know, and I don't want that for them. So keeping that in mind has been really helpful to make me feel like it makes so much sense. And it's really important for me to do those kind of things because I'm setting the example for them.
Heck yes, woman. You keep on setting that example. And we're going to keep setting that example for all you other women out there who need to hear this, because it's okay to take time for yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
This is such an amazing conversation. Can you share with us, when it comes to ADHD, what would you consider as your superpower?
Just finding solutions like that, thinking outside of the box. I can look back and see this in my accounting career because I was always the person that could like figure out the really complex stuff that everybody was like, this is just a mess. Nobody can do anything with it. Oh, give it to Jen. She'll figure it out. That has been I believe my superpower has been just this crazy problem solving in a way that just nobody thinks like me. We all think so differently. And I think we need to celebrate that so much more than we do. But just, yeah, my superpower would be just this sort of creative, really unique kind of problem solving ability. And I've kind of incorporated that into how I deal with all of this stuff and keep pursuing my weight loss goals, is just finding the ways that work for me, as obscure and interesting as they might be. I really believe that ADHD has helped to make that possible in so many ways in my life. And so that is my favorite part of it for sure.
That's beautiful. And thank you for sharing, because I agree. Our brains are incredible. Yes. Where can my listeners find you?
Yeah, so I am mostly on Instagram at Balance Living with ADHD. I'm working on my website, balancelivingwithadhd.com. And then my podcast, also called the same thing, Balance Living with ADHD. So that's where you can find me.
Heck yes. Everybody should go follow you. I follow you. I feel so joyful whenever I see your posts online. Also, because I know what kind of a generous and beautiful human you are. So,
thanks, Meg.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I can't wait to share our conversation with everyone.
Thanks, Megs.
Wow, that was such an incredible episode with Jen. I absolutely love her. So I wanted to share with you some of my biggest takeaways. The first one here is stop putting yourself down. You're not broken. You're learning new ways to live with ADHD. Find the acceptance, because in that, it's going to empower you to live a better life, in one that you can thrive. Number 2, even losing weight is different when you have ADHD. And white knuckling yourself through weight loss is not going to work. Weight loss needs to work with your existing life. Organizing needs to work with your existing life. And making small changes that implement teeny tiny changes is really what's going to pay off in the end and add up to so much more, even if it doesn't feel like it right away. Number 3, body cues might be different with people with ADHD too. Check in with yourself. I could totally relate to what Jen was saying as far as not being able to recognize when I was actually full or when I was actually hungry, a lot of it was because my brain was looking for the dopamine that I didn't realize I didn't have on a regular basis. 4, have compassion and kindness for yourself and have a plan when you fail, because you're going to fail. You're not going to do things perfectly. So what is it going to look like when that happens? And how can you show yourself kindness through this process? 5, learning about your own ADHD is just going to help you support your own kids even better, whether they have ADHD or not. It helps you look at your brain in a different way so that you can help them understand their own emotions when they're going through something. Number 6, take time for yourself. Take a look at the week ahead, figure out what that looks like, get a good idea of what's coming, whether it's in the morning, whether it's one day a week, all days a week, maybe it's at night because you're a night person. Regardless, find that time that works for you so that you can sit and really have some quiet time with yourself. Number 7, this one is so good. Let your kids see you taking time for yourself. When you think about how busy we can sometimes be, do you want your kids to do that one day? Do you want them to feel so overwhelmed with life that they don't know how to conquer their goals? Or do you want to see them taking time for themselves? We are the ones that need to set that example. Go check out Jenn on social media. She is absolutely incredible. Don't forget to leave a review, and I can't wait to see you next week. Oh, I did this new feature on the podcast platform that I use where you can actually send me a text message. So if you scroll down to the show notes, you can click a little button and it'll send me a text. Share your thoughts. It's so easy because there's a button for it. So cool. I mean, there's other ways to get in touch with me in the show notes too, but try it out. I'm so curious how it works. And I would love to post a text message that I get. So you guys are amazing. Thank you for all of your feedback. I have been hearing some beautiful, beautiful things about the podcast. So thank you. It keeps me going. If you would like to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, please consider joining my Patreon account where I'll post some additional content and some wise words from me, if you will. Join my Facebook page, like and share this podcast with whomever you think could benefit. I also have this amazing woman who is my friend. She owns a small batch skincare business in Colorado, and I have been using her CBD bath bombs forever. And I have a code that you can use to save 10%. If you use that code, you can order bath bombs for yourself and have it sent to you. I actually just had my father order the direct pain cream, and it is incredible. I use it for cramps, and he used it for his knee that was giving him a ton of pain. And he looked at me after he put it on. First, I had to promise him he's not going to get high, right? And he laughed at me, but also I think he was relieved that I confirmed that for him. But he looked at me and he was like, I can't believe this is working right now. He's taking aspirin, he's taking all of these other things to try to get the pain to diminish in any way. And this direct pain cream works. So check it out. Use my code to save money and you can have it shipped to you. So it doesn't matter where you are. Additionally, me and my husband use HelloFresh. I'm not sponsored by them in any way. So these are literally just free boxes that we can give away. So I put a code down in the show notes below. If you sign up for a free box, then we get to feed our family for a week for free. So thank you so much for supporting us. And you get to eat as well. So how about that? What a world we get to live in. If nothing else, just thank you for participating and listening.